The story began in a colorful medieval fantasy world, where our clever young hero Barney had just completed another invention that was meant to significantly ease everyone's life. His older brother and sister Cliff and Lucille immediately praised him for his impressive abilities, said that he had become famous throughout the city, and that everyone was grateful for his inventions, which truly made their daily lives much simpler. His sister hugged him tightly before their parents arrived and proudly said that Barney was their greatest pride and joy. Thanks to the exceptional skills Barney acquired as a magical engineer, he quietly promised to protect his homeland and his dear relatives. In the modern world, it all started with a tired and unambitious man finally hitting rock bottom, exhausted from continuous daily work, and every morning he was awakened by an irritating alarm clock. Fighting through the stuffy crowds in the overcrowded carriage, he wearily headed to his office, where the boss constantly scolded him, harshly ordered him to finish endless work, and often demanded he stay late despite the official closing time. He felt he had no choice but to obey the boss's orders. That fateful day, when he finally finished his task late after midnight, he immediately rushed to the station to catch the last train, but as he was running up the stairs, suddenly he was overwhelmed by a strong wave of dizziness, and he threw himself down. After a strong blow to the head, his body lay motionless, consciousness immediately began to fade, and he was gripped by the cold thought that he might die right now. Suddenly he was overwhelmed by an image of childhood, and he thought that this might be a deathbed memory. After his birth, his parents tragically died, and he became an orphan, but everyone in the shelter was kind. The relentless loneliness from the absence of family grew stronger and stronger within him. After finishing school, there was emptiness in his soul, and in the black company he was used as they wished. He believed that his life was worth nothing at all, and began to doubt the meaning of his life while desperately trying to move forward. Tears rolled down his face as he sincerely wished to be born in a family with boundless love in the next life. He only dreamed of truly loving someone and valuing himself, and when his consciousness began to fade into absolute darkness, a strange, extremely soft female voice quietly spoke the unfamiliar name Barney. When he slowly opened his eyes, he saw a kind woman who apologized for disturbing his sleep and gently said that it was time for his milk. Not knowing that he had been reborn as an infant, he tried to understand this strange situation to himself. At that moment Scott came, and this confused Barney even more, who was already embarrassed because of the milk. He thought that maybe he was in a hospital, but was stunned when he realized that his voice simply would not come out. Moreover, he did not understand how Dorothy managed to carry such a big person like him so easily. When Scott took the bottle of milk and gently brought it to his mouth, he realized that he had turned into a child. Calmly sucking the bottle, he doubted everything to himself, because he knew that after that terrible accident he should not have survived. He looked around and saw a house he had never seen before. It was not so much a foreign country as a fantastic world, as if straight from the page of a fairy tale. He thought that he had died and ended up as a baby in an unfamiliar place, which could only mean that he had truly been reborn in a new place. Looking at Scott and Dorothy, he realized that they were his new parents. It was then that the Warney brothers and sisters came. Their faces were shining, and with enthusiasm she showed them a beautiful golden flower that perfectly matched Barney's hair color. Lucille said that she found it at the grocery counter, and Cliff proudly admitted that they had pooled their pocket money and bought that exquisite flower to make a special gift for Barney. Seeing them, Barney immediately understood that they were definitely his older brothers and sisters. Moreover, Lucille gently handed him the flower, and then she confidently showed the magic of blessing, which released a swarm of shiny butterflies that smoothly circled around Barney and left him completely stunned and utterly enchanted. She also wished him a bright future and much happiness. It completely stunned him. Dorothy praised her for already using the magic of blessing at such a young age, and Lucille confidently replied that she had studied very hard to master this spell for her dear little brother. Seeing that his sister was getting all the attention, Cliff immediately said that he also wanted to show Barney his cool side, namely impressive swordsmanship. But bringing the sword into the house was practically impossible, so Cliff promised Barney that the next day he would show his sword skills and assured him that he could definitely protect his younger brother from any danger. It was then that Lucille suddenly appeared and said she would protect Barney with her magic, but when they started arguing, Scott intervened and gently stroked both of their heads, saying that they were already quite capable of protecting him as devoted older brothers and sisters. Cliff mockingly said that he had always been Lucille's older brother, but she aptly advised him to modestly accept praise at such times. Then Dorothy asked them to help with dinner. and Barney watches their tender exchange of love. He finally understood what a real happy family looks like, and that he was no longer alone the next day when the family was riding in the carriage. Barney was truly captivated by the landscapes of that enchanting world, and that day after lunch, they headed to the great cathedral in the royal capital to test their professional skills. Scott was a respected silver master and had a workshop in the royal capital, so they decided to stop there first and then go to the cathedral together. Soon Cliff was diligently training with a sword, easily striking the bark of a large tree with noticeable speed and accuracy. Seeing this, Barney looked at Scott in surprise, and his father explained that this was just Cliff's usual training. Cliff had a natural talent for swordsmanship and dreamed of becoming a renowned adventurer to explore dangerous dungeons around the world in the future. He also said that he had kept a strange stone because he thought it might be useful someday, and promised Cliff to introduce him to an experienced adventurer if Cliff managed to break that stone with a replica sword. He also said that Lucille had a natural talent for being a magician and an enormous, undeniable talent for magic. Barney was very surprised to learn about the natural talents and impressive abilities of his brothers and sisters. However, he thought that Scott's workshop would have no heir because Scott was a narrowly specialized silversmith. Scott proudly told him that he had made Cliff's sword replica with his own hands. Then Barney immediately pointed to the workshop. Scott apologized for not letting him go further and explained that there was a lot of dangerous equipment and complex tools in the workshop. Barney seemed clearly disappointed. Scott gently stroked his head and said he would consider it a special favor if during the upcoming evaluation ceremony he showed skill in the craft. But in the end, he wanted his children to go their own ways if they could truly live the life they most desired. It was then that Dorothy asked him for help. Barney thought about what jobs and special abilities he would have after the evaluation ceremony. From the blue cliffs appeared a broken-in-half part of a precious sword. Tears immediately ran down his face, and with a trembling voice, he said that his father had put a lot of effort into making this sword just for him. Barney panicked when he saw that he was crying, and thought that he might somehow fix the sword, although he had not yet shown any powers. At that moment, a transparent screen miraculously appeared before them. A list of items and necessary materials was shown. Barney could not understand the purpose of that strange screen, but it seemed that he could make a choice, like in a game. A menu of unlocks and resurrection benefits appeared on the screen with options for upgrades and repairs that could be used only once as part of his resurrection. Although Barney was truly confused, he realized that in a world where magic is real, such a possibility could exist. He then carefully selected the materials he needed to effectively use this mysterious magic. This repair required repair materials and magmatic ore, but Barney apparently could not get this ore immediately. Suddenly, Barney quickly looked around and noticed that his brother's pendant was barely glowing. Although Cliff seemed not to notice this, without hesitation, Barney began waving his little hands and squeaking loudly, trying to get his attention as Cliff approached him. He smiled gently and apologized for showing him such a pitiful, tearful side of himself, because his brother could not see the mysterious light. Barney became even more convinced that he probably had some extraordinary power. Without hesitation, sharply tugging at the necklace, Barney pulled Cliff toward him. Cliff staggered forward, and Barney stretched out his little hand toward the broken sword. Suddenly, the sword miraculously hung in the air, surrounded by a magical glow, for the family that gave him such sincere, unconditional love. If he could do at least something, Barney was ready to give everything for them. Soon the sword became like new again, and this completely stunned Cliff. He was simply amazed to see the incredible skill of his younger brother, but as soon as the sword touched him, he realized that the sword had become even more sharpened and perfectly balanced than before. Without hesitation, Cliff held his stance and swung the sword with tremendous force. The solid stone shattered into pieces, and Cliff and Barney were completely speechless at this impressive display of power. Cliff was undoubtedly glad, as he finally managed to break that stubborn rock, and he sincerely thanked Barney for the immediate help. Hearing the loud rumble from the powerful strike, Scott and Dorothy rushed to the spot and were stunned to see the broken stone. Cliff enthusiastically told them that Barney miraculously repaired his sword and broke the stone with it, while Scott carefully examined the sword. He shifted his gaze to Barney and looked at him confused, while Barney himself still could not fully believe in the extent of his strength. Scott sighed with relief, genuinely happy that his sons were unharmed, but looked suspiciously at the rocks, and asked him to break the stone once more, because he simply could not believe that he had made such a powerful strike himself. Shortly after they reached the cathedral and showed respect to the church rector, he carefully lifted Barney, jokingly calling him the star of the show. In this world, there were basic concepts called jobs, which indicated which profession a person was suited for and allowed the use of special skills according to the role. If a person has a hidden special ability, they can master a rare specialty through individual training. Shortly after their birth, all were usually subjected to an important rite of assessment to learn about their assigned work. Then the pastor led them to a quiet room where a single polished crystal ball stood neatly on a pedestal. The pastor aloud wondered what profession Barney would have, since his older brother was a promising swordsman and his older sister was an outstanding mage. He carefully took Barney's small hand and gently pressed it to the crystal ball, which showed exactly the same status screen that previously appeared in Barney. The pastor was very surprised when he saw the extremely bright glow coming from the crystal, and immediately informed everyone about Barney's unusual profession. He was an engineer of magical devices. It was an extremely rare profession that the pastor himself had never seen in all his years of service, and he noticed with interest that it remarkably coincided with the one in which Scott's works, so now Barney is more than qualified to lead the workshop. With a warm, sincere smile, Scott said that the final decision belongs to Barney, and as a father, he will gladly respect and support his son's choice, whatever it may be. His family was also delighted. Their faces shone upon hearing his soothing and loving speech. When Scott gently took him in his arms, Barney then fully realized that he had truly received a valuable opportunity to live in a kind and loving family. And now he is ready for anything to protect the happiness he could find together with his beloved family. His eyes shone with burning determination as he promised to become a worthy engineer of magical instruments in this new world, and unquestionably strong for the sake of his beloved family. One clear sunny day, the sky was bright blue, and Barney watched Cliff train with a sword. His fencing seemed much better. A year had passed since his evaluation ritual, and his older brother had been relentlessly training in swordsmanship. After the day when Cliff managed to split a rack with an ordinary sword replica, Scott arranged a meeting for him with an adventurer. And Barney still seemed to understand nothing about how to be an engineer of magical instruments. Although he had the opportunity to test his abilities, he was afraid that the family would not allow such experiments. Seeing that his brother was constantly training hard, Barney decided to put aside his thoughts and instead enjoy the day, because it was an important day for his family. After some time, when everyone was riding in the carriage, Scott said that enrollment to the Lucille Academy was coming soon, and Dorothy suggested going on a picnic before that happened. Lucille is turning 7 years old this year. Since she was a great mage, she was exempted from the entrance exam to the Royal Academy, and enrollment was scheduled for a week later. At first, Lucille was also happy about this, but it was clear that it hurt her to leave her family. The academy was a boarding school, and it seemed she would only be able to see her relatives during long vacations, so loneliness was inevitable. To lift her spirits, Cliff jokingly ruffled her hair and asked her not to make a sad face, assuring her that she would have fun at school. Soon they found themselves in a stunning place by a lake, surrounded by lush, beautiful trees, and that day Barney had a secret plan, so he decided to create many warm memories with his sister Lucille. They froze, seeing such a beautiful place. Scott explained that this was a hidden gem not far from the royal capital, which he had found when he was an adventurer. He explained that no monsters appeared there because of the barrier of the royal magical core. Although sometimes higher-ranked, intelligent monsters broke through the barrier, it was believed that they avoided this area because it was close to human settlements. Hearing this, Barney wondered if Scott had once been an adventurer too, and although it was dangerous since there were constantly formidable dungeons and various monsters around, he felt a strong curiosity. Scott then thoughtfully suggested to Dorothy to give Barney a protective charm and to give another to Cliff, because his magic seemed to have run out. When Dorothy carefully put a thin necklace on Barney's neck, he immediately noticed that the pendant was the same one he had once used to repair his broken sword. Scott casually said that it was a simple protective talisman made from magical aura, but added that it could eventually be used for a completely different purpose. After a short, warm conversation, he decided to slowly walk around the lake with his beloved family. Exploring the surroundings, they spent valuable time together and truly bonded as a family. They interacted with various local animals and wove beautiful wreaths from flowers. They even tried fishing by the lake. When Lucille's fishing rod suddenly started to pull from the foreshe, they all grabbed the sturdy rod together. And together they pulled out a huge catch. Soon an appetizing fish dish was served before them. and Lucille admitted that she wished Barney could also taste the delicious dish she personally caught. Cliff immediately intervened and proudly said that it was thanks to the right support that they managed to catch such a big fish. But she claimed that she was the one who actually pulled it out. At that moment, Barney thought it was not the time to be distracted and that it was time to try to speak. His face immediately lit up with genuine joy and in a creaky, determined voice. He barely uttered the words but managed to call Lucille and express his admiration. Barney was sincerely proud that he could say a few words as he had practiced. While Lucille was overwhelmed by her younger brothers, an unexpected gratitude appeared. And then Dorothy, arrayed with a warm smile, said that Lucille was very lucky that her dear brother called her an older sister. Since then, Barney wanted to collect valuable memories with his family for a lifetime and hoped that there would be more and more of them. After a pleasant lunch, Cliff asked his father for permission to take a walk together with Lucille and Barney, and Scott advised them not to go far from the picnic spot. After some time, as they were delving into the dense canopy of the forest, Lucille asked Cliff about an acquaintance whom their father had promised to introduce to him. Cliff replied that by law one can join the Adventurers Guild only from the age of 13, and he was only 9, so for now he was just an apprentice under this person's guidance, and he was still far from dungeon expeditions and great adventures. He also told Lucille that dungeons are not places you can just enter casually. And not all dungeons were securely closed with protective barriers and had designated safe zones, like the one they were now making their way through. Embarrassed by his words, she said that when he becomes a real adventurer, he will inevitably have to go to such dangerous places. At the same time, he inadvertently admitted that he had a dream he wanted to fulfill. But when she persistently continued to ask, he suggested stopping the conversation for now and returning to their parents. Just then, Arnie heard an unusual rustle in the dense bushes. When he tried to look further, he immediately asked Cliff to check that area for him, but when Cliff boldly pushed aside the bushes that were hiding something to look, they shuddered when a huge white wolf lay before them. Barney, stunned by its size and sudden appearance, thought it might be some kind of monster, because ordinary wolves should not be so gigantic. Without hesitation, Cliff ordered Lucille to hide securely behind him along with Barney, and she quickly said, her voice trembling with fear because she could not believe he was seriously going to fight that monster alone. He assured her that he would distract the creature and draw its attention to himself while they ran to their parents and told them about the danger. Despite his outward bravery, it was clear that he was actually scared and confused. Barney thought about another way to save everyone from that fierce monster. But when the wolf slowly rose to its feet and took a few trembling steps toward them, suddenly it turned its head and a piercing gaze averted, and seeing this, Barney thought that the wolf might not be hostile, but immediately noticed that it seemed to be suffering, possibly from pain. Cliff, still in protective mode, ordered Lucille to take Barney and run, but she refused to leave him behind. On the other hand, Barney believed there was a high probability that this wolf was not an ordinary monster at all. Moreover, recalling the words previously said by his father about higher-ranking monsters who were intelligent, he pondered. If that wolf really was a higher intelligent being, then it is logical that they were in a zone protected by a barrier, and then there was a possibility that they could communicate with it. Suddenly, Barney's talisman began to softly glow, and before him again appeared the familiar transparent screen, and he realized that this was the same situation as before. Now he was confident that they would be able to safely handle this situation. Without wasting time, he grabbed the shining talisman and at the same moment took the scarf, directing his extraordinary magical power into it. He then carefully handed the scarf, just filled with magic, to Cliff, and gestured to him to put it on the huge white wolf. Although Lucille was quite understandably worried about the possible danger, Cliff trusted the intuition of his younger brother. Considering that the formidable monster was not attacking them either, they cautiously approached the creature. When he slowly approached the wolf, he sincerely apologized for hastily pointing his sword at it, and assured that they would not harm it if it did not intend to attack. When Cliff came closer, the wolf unexpectedly sat down submissively, so Cliff carefully threw the scarf around its neck. The wolf said that the scarf was quite nice. Cliff replied that he was truly glad, and then the majestic beast introduced itself as the divine beast Alberos and asked them to fulfill its request. Although Cliff initially agreed without hesitation, he suddenly froze in amazement along with Lucille and Barney when everyone finally realized that the divine creature spoke like a human, and it was completely impossible. The wolf calmly settled in front of Barney's cart and said that it seemed to be all because of the scarf he had tied, so now they could understand his words. Barney was very glad that the translator he created worked wonderfully and that the wolf did not seem hostile, but he was much more interested in the wolf's urgent request. At that moment, Lucille asked what had happened to that majestic creature, because it seemed to be in pain. In response, Albero admitted that he had come there to hide after an illness and, unfortunately, had lost the ability to move, so he asked if they happened to have a potion for recovery at that critical moment. Lucille immediately understood that it was a magical poison, when Cliff asked her about it in more detail. She informed him that it was a poison that infected the very magical energy flowing through the body. After infection, the affected body gradually lost the ability to move. She explained that magical poison could arise naturally, or there might simply be some specific variant in the region. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, Cliff said that this was an emergency and emphasized that they must ensure their father immediately informed the Royal Guild of Mages. But first of all, Lucille hugged the woolen staff covered with fur and cast a healing spell on it. Alberos was amazed when he encountered such powerful magic that immediately allowed him to feel much better. Cliff was very surprised to see that his sister also knew how to heal with magic. She admitted that although she knew how to use it, she had not yet mastered it perfectly, and explained that she had only partially learned it in case something happened to their beloved family. Albero expressed sincere gratitude for her timely help and modestly offered to do something in return. To everyone's surprise, she calmly asked the majestic beast if they would agree to live together with her family. Barney thought to himself that Lucille was a smart girl, so there was probably a deeper reason behind her hasty decision. His hopes were quickly dashed when she joyfully said that she had always wanted a big dog. Cliff gently explained that Alberos was not originally a dog and had its own will to decide its fate, and Alberos said without hesitation that it had long been very interested in the life of humans in society. Seeing the hint of willingness to accept, they soon cautiously approached the parents and asked for permission to take Alberos into the family, and to their relief, Scott and Dorothy were not very opposed. Dorothy thought it would also be good publicity for the workshop, while Barney thought she actually wanted to turn the sacred creature into a simple mascot. He was surprised that Cliff had already given him the familiar nickname L. Instead, Scott said that it was Barney who gave Albero the magical scarf, and that he definitely put his whole soul and heart into making it to protect his older brothers and sisters. He sincerely thanked Barney and warmly welcomed Albero into their family, as no one seemed to object to this arrangement, for help in a time of need. Alberos since then promised to protect them as a dear family. Thus their unique family grew, and several years passed in harmony, until all the children promised to set off each on their own path to finally fulfill their own dreams. The scene smoothly shifted to a magnificent estate, where a messenger informed the venerable Lord Zorian about an outbreak of poisonous magic reported several years ago, and explained that the initial cause was eliminated, but the outbreak seems to be recurring again. He also asked if Lord Zorian would agree for the Royal Magical Corps to begin investigating the affected area. In the morning, Scott ordered Barney and Alberos to urgently deliver the cargo and promised to reward him with a precious piece of magical ore. Barney decisively agreed and immediately went to deliver the goods together with Alberos. It was noticeable that Barney was quite excited, especially because the reward was magical ore, and he explained that magical ore was extremely necessary for a magical tools engineer like him. Barney, over the past few years, gradually and confidently realized the power of magical tools engineers. Magical ores were very useful for crafting and repairing various materials, but to create truly special items, several important conditions were required. The first were recipes and levels. He needed to unlock specific recipes listing materials and methods, but these recipes were unlocked only depending on the profession level. The second was the magical ore piece itself, to endow items with special functions. The innate magical power of such rare ores was absolutely necessary regardless of his level. However, the extraction has significantly decreased recently, so prices have soared, and it has become very difficult for him to obtain these important ores. He believed that pocket money was, of course, pleasant, but acquiring a significant portion of magicor was far from easy. Alberos could not help but say that it was precisely because of this that Barney was noted for his usual diligence and hard work. Soon everyone arrived at their destination and quickly handed over the goods to the waiting owner. Barney thanked Alberos once again for the invaluable help and asked if he wanted to go to the diner, and he replied that he would have a hearty T-bone steak. As they walked to the diner, a kind woman greeted them both without hesitation. They quickly ordered themselves an omelet with rice and a T-bone steak. At that moment, Dorothy peeked out from a quiet corner of the crowded room, smiled warmly, and waved to them, and Alberos said that it was truly pleasant to see that she was feeling much better. Her health was initially quite weak, but recently she had been feeling fairly well since she became a bright star of Tichen's cafe. Barney could not help but notice that everyone in the family had become noticeably livelier and happier since Alberos became an integral part of them, and he believed that this might be a blessing from a divine being. Just then Cliff, along with his friend Petty, entered the diner. When he saw Barney, Cliff asked if he was helping their father together with Alberos, and Barney replied that they had just finished the task. Petty warmly greeted them with a friendly smile, and Cliff approached the counter to place an order. When he moved forward, Barney apologized to her for interrupting there. It seemed date, because she had finally been left alone with his brother, and her face immediately flushed as soon as she heard his remark. And when Cliff arrived, she hurriedly said that Cliff was just her friend. She was completely unaware of her feelings, and Cliff's direct confirmation shattered her hopes and clearly broke her heart. When they were 14 years old, Cliff and Patty were active members of the same adventure group in Kajuru. It was obvious that tender, youthful relationships could have blossomed between them, but Cliff hardly noticed them, and Patty was the beloved daughter of the respected party leader Zach. And since it seemed he loved both his daughter and Cliff very much, for Cliff he became almost a second father. Patty, in turn, seemed to sincerely consider Barney and Alberos dear members of her family. He spoke with Barney's brother to find out if they were setting out on a new adventure. But Cliff calmly objected, saying that they had just completed the usual task of herding the herd and were now returning to report to the guild. Without hesitation, Patty intervened and frankly said that they would immediately go to collect magical ore after that, but before she could say another word, Cliff quickly covered her mouth with his hand, cutting her off mid-sentence. But it was already too late, and Barney was not naive enough to miss such an important hint. Magical aura is expensive to buy, but collecting it yourself cost nothing at all, although numerous dangers lurked at every step. If Barney somehow obtains this, he knew that he would finally be able to use the unlocked recipes and improve his skills. Even before he managed to ask Cliff to take him along, Cliff immediately refused. In a firm tone, Cliff said that curiosity is certainly a good thing, but Barney is only 6 years old. He noted that although mining magical ore does not necessarily lead them into dungeons, it does not mean they won't encounter dangerous monsters. Cliff had every right to be very worried about his younger brother and did not want anything bad to happen to him. At that moment, Patty intervened and calmed him down, whispering to Barney that she would definitely help him. At that moment, she slyly asked if Cliff forgot the basic rules of KJRU. In particular, any deviations from the party's plan must be reported directly to the leader, and everything is ultimately decided according to his decision. Although this was indeed the guild protocol, Cliff said that Barney was not an adventurer from the very beginning, in an unexpected turn of events. Dorothy came with their orders and a smile. Kunlai assured them that everything would be fine and advised Cliff to protect his younger brother on his own if he was really that worried. Moreover, she casually mentioned that Scott was also once in Zach's party. Therefore, she believed that he would also definitely give his consent. She firmly took Barney by his small hands and gently asked if he could properly express his feelings, why he wanted magical ore so much, and why he passionately aspired to become an engineer of magical devices. Barney immediately agreed, so Dorothy suggested going to the guild together. Soon they arrived at the Noisy Adventurers Guild, and Barney was delighted to see the liveliness here, as it was his first visit to such a place. However, he firmly slapped himself on the cheeks, reminding himself that it was not time to be dreamy and that he needed the leader to notice him. Then Cliff led him to the inn where Kajuru was based. Besides, he assured Barney that at first he might be scared, but advised him to just behave as usual. Petty also said that Zach looked stern and more like a bandit leader, but reassured Barney that in reality he was very soft-hearted, and despite their assurances, Barney could not calm down. As soon as they entered the tavern, Barney froze at the sight of the majestic leaders of Kajuru. Petty casually remarked that he seemed to worry too much, but Zach replied that often the simplest things are the hardest. Moreover, he immediately paid attention to Barney. He said he looked quite similar to Dorothy, and introduced himself to Zach somewhat uncertainly as Barney. Meanwhile, Cliff informed that they wanted to ask him for a favor. When Zach cast puzzled glances at Barney, Patty said he would scare him off if he looked so frightening, and Zach inquired what it was about. Barney Bradley said he wanted to join Cliff and Patty on their magical or expedition trip, and asked him to allow him to join. Zach looked at him fiercely and asked why he did that. Although Barney was very scared by his intimidation, he gathered all his courage. He told him about his profession and admitted that on this journey, he wanted to acquire magic and use it to create even more of his unique inventions. He said he wanted to become a full-fledged adult as soon as possible, and sincerely said he wanted to protect his loving family. Everyone was quite surprised when they heard his sincere feelings. And Zach unexpectedly patted him on the head and said he passed the test. Barney's embarrassed expression soon changed to genuine joy, and he thanked him, and Zach with a smile said that Barney had now undoubtedly proven why Scott always proudly called him his pride and joy. However, when only young children set out on such a dangerous adventure, the squad seemed insufficiently resilient, so Zach decisively called another reliable gilded adventurer named Joseph. And although Joseph might have seemed young and was told to go with them, he was personally Zach's trusted man and knew how to reliably protect the children from any danger. With an encouraging smile, he cheered them on to successfully complete the quests and wished them a safe journey. Hours passed and they reached home. They sincerely sat before their parents and fervently asked Scott to allow Barney to go on the adventure. Barney said he wanted to grow and improve his skills. But Scott seemed to hesitate about this decision, saying that even on a simple gathering task monsters appear. Cliff reassuringly said that Scott could definitely trust him because he would protect Barney with all his might in case of danger and bring him home safely. Dorothy also gently pushed Scott to give them more freedom because their children had grown up so quickly and noticeably. Scott himself was also surprised at how much faster the children were growing than he could have imagined. The next day everyone was fully equipped and ready, eagerly setting off on the adventure together. Scott fully trusted Joseph and said he was counting on him, and Joseph constantly promised to take care of everything. With a light joking push on their backs, Scott urged them on, and this gesture instantly gave them confidence. Over time, they traveled through the forest in their carriage, and Joseph suggested taking a good rest, explaining that it would take them almost 2 hours to reach the Rodneo Valley, where the magical ore was. Advancing deeper through the dense forest, Barney asked about the forbidden area they were passing by. Alberos said that it seemed to lead straight to the forest where they first met, and the territory soaked with magical poison. Joseph said that since magical poison was first found in that forest, 5 years had passed, and the Royal Magical Corps took about a year to thoroughly survey the area. Although trade routes were already secured, people still believed that the forest and its lakes were contaminated with magical poison. Hearing this news, Barney gently told Alberos that it was a bit lonely there because the place was filled with their dear memories. Over time, they finally reached the designated spot and immediately began gathering valuable magical ore. When they arrived in the magical Rodneo Valley, Barney was truly captivated by the amazing beauty of the place. Joseph informed them that although the monster level in that valley might be low, dangerous creatures sometimes appeared, so everyone should be vigilant and focused. Their first task was to scout the ore deposits, but Barney did not waste time and took out his newest invention. He took from his pocket a mysterious round crystal ring and proudly showed it to everyone. Cliff said he realized that Barney was up to something clever when Scott gave him permission that evening, and then inquired about his new unique creation. Instead of just talking about it, Barney decided to show his skills and let the robot speak for itself. As soon as he pulled out his little hands, a beam of light shone brightly in a certain direction, hinting that something important lay ahead. He explained that it was a magical device created to find mana stones and accurately indicate their location, and Barney wanted nothing more than to sincerely help in the research. Joseph considered his invention truly impressive and decided to immediately use his device for further exploration. After walking a bit, following the light in a certain direction, they finally came across a fertile gorge. Its rocky landscape was densely dotted with sparkling magical ores. Barney was proud and at the same time relieved, because the careful work with the Magicore he acquired after the previous assignment really paid off. Joseph was very impressed that he could create such convenient tools. However, Barney modestly admitted that the device had certain limitations, but added that with the necessary materials, anything was possible. Cliff proudly showed his sword and told Joseph that Barney had skillfully made it too, to which Joseph enthusiastically added that he would probably have to order one for himself next time. After that, the group moved forward and decided not to waste time gathering those valuable magical horrors. They all united and began together, collecting magical wars from the rocky landscape. How they gather a large amount of these resources. Joseph was surprised that in such a short time he managed to obtain so much ore. He jokingly said that with that miraculous ring, they could compete with the elite mages of the Royal Academy in the magic of detection, and all this without those complicated demaster spells. Joseph suggested that Barney could also perform any work with his amazing magical device, but Barney modestly said that he doubted he would ever be able to match the magical abilities of his older sister. Joseph asked Treddy if he meant Lucille, whose education was partially paid for by Cliff, and this completely caught Cliff off guard, so he warned Joseph not to speak about such things carelessly in their presence. Barney asks if Lucille was not fully exempt from paying for education, to push Cliff to admit that although Lucille was a scholarship holder, her education was not fully exempt from payment, only partially. He added that it was not an amount he could not pay, and that their father probably strained himself a lot for Lucille. That is why he needed to become a full-fledged adventurer as soon as possible to help the family financially. However, when Barney asked him about fulfilling his personal dreams, Cliff assured him that he himself truly dreams of becoming the best adventurer in the world. He said that only the imagination of the future, where he sets off to places no one has reached yet, finds priceless treasures, and bravely saves people from terrible monsters, makes his heart beat with excitement. Moreover, since he cared deeply about his family, he was comforted by the thought that he could truly help everyone. He proudly said that he would earn great profits and expand their workshop to enormous sizes. Barney, with unwavering determination, said that he would also become the best engineer of magical devices in the capital and provide for his beloved family. Hearing these sincere words, Cliff immediately hugged him tightly and said that he was sincerely proud of his wonderful younger brother. In this touching moment, Patty glanced around and suddenly noticed abandoned weapons stained with blood, which made her wonder why she was here. She immediately informed Joseph about the abandoned weapons, emphasizing that they probably belonged to travelers who had faced terrible monsters. Joseph said that they might not be alone and that danger could be lurking nearby, so he advised to leave quickly because they had already gathered a lot of precious magicore. However, his face darkened as soon as he felt the disturbing presence of a sinister creature sneaking up, and Alberos also instinctively took a defensive stance. Wasting no time, Joseph ordered everyone to stay in their positions and be on alert. This left Barney completely confused and worried about their sudden sharp change in behavior. Out of nowhere, a huge monster appeared and attacked them with its massive fists, but they barely dodged the blow. The sudden appearance completely confused them, and his enormous strength caused shockwaves in the air and broke the very ground with his bare hands. When he was about to strike again, Alberos instantly grabbed Barney with his fangs and suggested they flee immediately. However, the other three remained steadfast and declared that this was their territory, and assured Alberos to leave the matters to them. All three simultaneously rushed at the beast. They managed to land a blow and wound its large body. However, it roared and quickly swiped its claws to defend itself. Suddenly, Joseph noticed that the wound they inflicted instantly healed. After that, Cliff took the opportunity and boldly charged from behind, but the cunning monster anticipated the attack and quickly counterattacked with a powerful strike that threw him across the field and slammed him against the nearest wall with tremendous force. Then the beast fiercely kicked Patty and threw her to the ground, and Joseph, thinking quickly, immediately threw a smoke grenade toward the animal. Giving them some time to catch their breath, Joseph ordered the rest of the team to leave the scene immediately and head to the capital to call for reinforcements while he bravely held the defense. Patty did not give in and insisted that they would not leave him behind or run away. But Joseph firmly said that the elder must protect the younger, and that is why Zach took him with him. When the smoke began to dissipate, Joseph sharply spoke and strictly ordered them to flee. Barney knew that Joseph was risking his life to help them escape, and his selfless efforts would be in vain if they stayed there any longer. But leaving a comrade behind was unthinkable and would betray their friendship. But before Barney could react, huge stones collapsed from the cliff. But Alberos instantly appeared and saved him from the inevitable danger with his incredible speed. He noted that the monster was clearly of some strange breed, and even he himself would not cope fighting to protect everyone. If you ask Barney again about his key choice, whether he wanted to escape or stay and stand against the formidable enemy, it was then that the crystal ring on his hand began to glow brightly, and beams of light were directed straight toward the recent rockslide. It was strongly reacting to something hidden deep in the broken cliff. And that dazzling light clearly emphasized that whatever it was not ordinary magic. He believed it could be the great magicker, and only that could break through that terrible deadlock. He immediately glanced at the abandoned weapon and decisively decided that he would take it. Without hesitation, Alberos rushed at the monster and bit hard into its huge hand, while Albany urgently asked Joseph to buy them 3 crucial minutes. However, still doubting his intentions, Joseph suggested fleeing, but Barney pulled his hand back, and in a resolute tone, said that he still possessed the incredible power of his abilities as an engineer of magical instruments. He boldly scolded Joseph for even thinking of leaving them alone in the face of danger, and firmly assured that they would all return together, alive and safe. He asked him to have unwavering faith in him. Joseph and the others were surprised by his extraordinarily brave words. Joseph lightly laughed, and noted that their party would make no sense if he could not trust his comrades. He also asked Barney to ensure that when they returned to the capital, he would be made a really good weapon. Then they prepared to execute their plan and hold the monster for 3 minutes. Joseph further declared that he would show them how to make big money. While Alberos fiercely fought the fierce monster, Barney urgently asked them to buy him 3 crucial minutes so he could create an important magical tool. Joseph immediately agreed and ordered Cliff and Patty to stick together and coordinate attacks as soon as the enemy focused on him, after which Barney called Albero back. And when the divine beasts quickly approached his side, it turned to Joseph and urged him to believe in his own strength. When 3 of them prepared to enter the fight with the monster, Barney asked Alberos to get a large magical ore from behind the broken stone wall, and he himself began quickly gathering all the necessary iron materials. Meanwhile, Cliff thought to himself with slight irritation. Although he did not yet have the strength to change their situation on his own, he could not believe that he had to rely so heavily on his younger brother when he fiercely attacked the beast. He could not help but consider himself pathetic. St. Barney tries so hard to protect everyone. Cliff decided that it was not the time to doubt his abilities and once again rushed at the monster. He reminded himself that he had trained tirelessly for years to protect his family and be an example for his younger brother. He was determined not to let his precious dream of becoming a great traveler shatter at that decisive moment and would never give up on his potential, no matter the circumstances. While Cliff relentlessly attacked the beast, Joseph calmly noted that acting alone would usually be considered a serious breach of discipline. Joseph and Petty did not retreat for a moment and boldly engaged in battle with the terrible monster. Instead, Barney carefully gathered all the necessary materials, and Albero gave him a lot of great magic ore, which brightly shone and surprised Barney with its strong light. Meanwhile, the fierce growl of the beast shook the ground and shattered stones as it advanced on Cliff with its claws sharp as blades. But Cliff was not afraid and bravely deflected the destructive sword strike. Joseph and Petty also helped him, holding back the onslaught with combined strength. Together with their sharp blades, they cut through its fearsome claws, but the resilient creature did not retreat and with a swing of its huge paw knocked them to the ground. When the monster smiled slyly, it instantly froze, noticing that Barney had suddenly disappeared. Cliff, still wounded, surprisingly admitted defeat and stated that the chance they all created together would not be lost. Thanks to their timely intervention, Barney arrived with Alberos and released a dazzling beam of light that struck the beast with incredible force. A huge hole formed in its chest, and the monster fell heavily to the ground. This caused a great explosion that released a deadly cloud of poisonous gas and quickly poisoned the air around them. Joseph thought aloud that this might be the very magical poison and immediately ordered everyone to cover their mouths. Warney could not understand all the commotion, but before he could realize anything, Cliff ran up and immediately hugged him, tears of relief rolling down his face as he realized that Barney was safe. Barney was surprised by his brother's strong emotions and simply suggested they go home together. However, Joseph could not comprehend how magical poison could come from such a strange monster in such a relatively safe place. He wisely decided to temporarily set aside his worries because everyone survived and that was enough for him, but none of them noticed the strange shadowy figure behind, who carefully watched their every move. Thus ended the terrible incident in the Redinio Valley, and around the canyon leading to the forest, a fence was quickly erected by direct order of Zack. After the fight, Cliff and Barney returned home both bloodied and bruised. On the faces of the parents was deep anxiety, but when they hurried to tightly embrace the children, they were overwhelmed with great relief. It seemed this event was finally over, and Marnie thought they would return to a peaceful everyday life, but fate had other plans for him. On one ordinary fine day, Barney went to Auntie's snack bar together with Alberos, and Auntie greeted him with a warm smile, asking if he had come again on an errand. He replied that he was going to help his father in the workshop, but looking around at the unusually quiet surroundings, he noticed that it was quite empty for lunchtime. She said that since the incident with Barney's team in the Redinio Canyon, there had been fewer customers, and this had been going on for some time. Barney said that most of the snack bar's customers were travelers, but she noted that due to the sudden closure of the Redinho Valley, where Magicker was safely mined, many adventurers were relocating their bases away from the royal capital due to a significant drop in trade. She also said with concern that shops like hers, which heavily depended on those resources and the adventures they attracted, were now going through hard times. Putting aside complaints, she apologized for the gloomy conversation and inquired about his orders. Shortly after returning home, Barney thought that the royal capital was still thoroughly investigating the magical poison. And now, as its effects were actively spreading throughout the capital, it became clear that fixing this would not be easy. He was looking for a way, as a magical device engineer, to help convince adventurers to stay in the capital. It was then that he saw a large crowd of people in the distance and began to take a closer look. Scott called him and asked for help calming the noisy crowd. To Barney's surprise, the crowd immediately approached him, their faces glowing with admiration, and they asked him to make weapons for them. One of them enthusiastically said that he had heard about Barney from Joseph of Mirage, and that the weapons he made were undoubtedly the best in the capital. Barney was very pleased with such praise. He immediately thought that his weapons could become widely known among adventurers. Then there was a high probability that more people would come to the capital, specifically for his craftsmanship. Moreover, he was sure that this would help improve Scott's workshop's financial situation. With a determined expression, he confidently said that he truly knew how to skillfully make certain things as a magical tools engineer. He also assured everyone that he would take full responsibility for making weapons for each person. Immediately after his sincere confession, people began eagerly demanding weapons precisely tailored to their personal needs and individual traits. The scene shifted to a respected academy, where a mysterious figure with strange feet approached a scientist named Evans. He asked whether he himself had thoroughly studied the magical poison. Evans called himself an ecologist and told the man that he had been researching magical poison for many years. In response, the man said with anxious calm that new effects of the magical poison might appear, which truly surprised Evans. The man also inquired whether he would be willing to cooperate in experiments. Over time, the incident in the Redinho Valley seemed like a distant memory, but the situation hardly changed. Barney could only do what was within his power. He came to the Adventurers Guild to deliver the ordered items. Simultaneous greeting of Zach and Joseph. Zach invited him to drink with them with a friendly gesture. Joseph noted that Barney's weapons had gained a good reputation throughout the capital, and Hazure was also very popular among adventurers. However, Joseph noticed Barney's slight anxiety and kindly asked what was troubling him. Sighing, Barney said that he noticed how the liveliness of the capital was gradually fading and thought that they still needed to move forward despite the difficulties. After that alarming event, the number of adventurers in the capital gradually decreased, and that was the main reason for his deep concern. Zach, with slight irritation, noted that Zorian was exaggerating and there was no justified reason to completely ban records. Barney doubted whether Zorian really decided to impose such a strict blockade, and Zach confirmed it. He said that Zorian never liked adventurers who sold magicka on their own. He also claimed that no one knew when the seal from the valley would be lifted again, especially due to persistent magical toxins. Moreover, since the forest was closed, 5 years had passed, and people said the closure could last a long time. Besides, Zorian recently raised the tax that his adventurers paid to the guild, which indicated his complete indifference to their profession. At this rate, it was clear that the capital would inevitably decline, and Alberos' voice was worried as he asked if Kedru would be okay under these changes. To which Zach replied that their skills were not bad, and important connections in the monster hunters community and with influential acquaintances were preserved. However, many newly accepted adventurers appeared in the guild, and easy tasks were becoming increasingly rare. Barney doubted that new waves of adventurers were coming to the capital, because their capabilities when working with such adventurers, even in selling magical instruments, were very limited, and at that very moment Joseph suggested they start selling those powerful weapons that Barney made back then to defeat that fierce monster in the Redinho Valley. In response, Barney said that it was quite difficult for him, because creating that magical instrument required a large magical ore. He accidentally came across it, but the materials for mass production were too rare to be constantly mined. Moreover, he noted that spending almost all the energy on one shot was not very practical for travelers. Just then Scott appeared and casually asked if Barney was still with them. Seeing him, Marnie suggested returning to the workshop together, and Scott immediately agreed. Zack visited him and assured him that he could always return to the guild if blacksmithing became difficult for him. But Scott modestly replied that he was already retired. After a short conversation, they said goodbye and parted ways. Soon, walking the streets, Scott saw Barney's thoughtful expression and asked what he was thinking so deeply about, and Barney replied that he was pondering how to find ways to spread magical instruments not only through adventures. Scott jokingly ruffled his hair and commented on his kindness, noting his obvious care for everyone else. As soon as they came home, Scott saw a letter from the academy director in the mailbox, which stated that the owner was very impressed by the exquisite skill of the staff used by his daughter. They also officially requested the production of musical staffs for general use in their school. Moreover, Gulf Barney and Scott were surprised by the demand for 50 such sticks. To their delight, the owner assured that all necessary materials, including the important magical ore, would be provided to them along with the attached magic circle. At that very moment, a shining magic circle appeared in the sky above them. The generous rain of enchanted magicker was a dazzling spectacle and caused them great admiration. And they decided to resolutely fulfill this request. Meanwhile, at the prestigious academy, Lucille was enjoying a nice day and having lunch with a friend. When Lucille was unwrapping a sandwich, her friend asked if it was that popular limited edition sandwich, and Lucille confirmed that she had made a special effort to get it. Although she admitted that she really missed homemade food. The friend assured her that she would soon be able to visit her family because summer holidays would start soon. Out of nowhere, a dove gracefully brought a small rolled-up letter. Lucille's face lit up with genuine joy as soon as she read its pleasant content. She said that the director, known as Regale, had asked her father to make the sticks, and they would be delivered soon, which clearly indicated that she would see them very soon. She added that she used a stick that Scott made during training when the director was talking to her. Regale praised the perfect stability of the magical power it transmitted, saying it was due to the exceptional quality of those tools, but Lucille never thought she would actually ask Scott for those very tools. With a light touch, she filled the dove with blessing magic and released it, and her friend sincerely rejoiced for Lucille because she would finally see her family after a long separation. In a moment, she reminded Lucille that it was already time for their lesson, and they quickly headed to the East Wing for ecology class. As they walked through the corridors and saw excited monsters nearby, the girl said she would never feel calm with such creatures on campus. Lucille also agreed that it remained quite tense, even despite the powerful magic supporting their control. At that moment, they noticed a girl slowly approaching the monsters and offering them medicine. They saw that Jean was calmly standing so close to the creatures. Lucille's friend said that someone might run away at any moment out of fear, and added that the students carrying the monsters were from Mr. Evans's class. Just as they were setting off, a sudden strong resistance from a monster caught them by surprise. However, Jean did not lose composure and immediately used her magic to calm the distressed creature. Both Lucille and her friend were very impressed by the display. Casting a calming spell without uttering words is truly impossible. Instead, Lucille said it did not feel like magic because she did not sense mana. As if they were communicating directly. Gina gently stroked the monster, and her attention clearly pleased the creature. Meanwhile, Lucille was amazed by the child's incredible abilities. Then she approached Gina, introduced herself as a student of the Department of Magical Studies, and gently inquired about her special skills. She also asked Gina's name, but when Gina shyly introduced herself, she apologized and immediately fled the scene, leaving them to wonder if she was just a shy girl. The scene shifted to the center of the row in the Scott house, where everyone was diligently working on crafting the ordered weapons, working tirelessly day and night to complete each piece with special care. Soon they finished making all the weapons. Scott thanked Barney and Alberos for their invaluable help. Now it was time to deliver a large batch to the academy, and Scott noted that transporting it would be a serious challenge. But as always, Barney already had a solution for this problem. Looking at his material screen, he inquired whether Scott had a large leather bag, metal, and some magic or shards on hand. Scotland replied that the bag and metal were easy to get, and he had a few shards of magical ore left after making the staff. Upon receiving his confirmation, Arnie did not waste time. He waved his hand, directed his magic, and skillfully. He placed the items into a strangely sturdy bag. Scott noticed that it looked ordinary, but was surprised when Barney skillfully stuffed a huge weapon into that small bag. Barney proudly said that it was a magical bag of great capacity, which could effortlessly hold anything larger in size. Suddenly Scott lifted him with joy, but Barney waved his hands and said he was very embarrassed and that Scott was behaving unusually like a child. Moreover, Scott proudly said that he was truly glad that Barney appeared in his life and that he was a wonderful engineer of magical devices at such a young age. They decided to spend the night and deliver the goods the next day. They had no idea about the approaching danger because the monster djinn, who tenderly cared for them, radiated truly gloomy and threatening energy. The next day under a clear sky, Scott together with Barney and Alberos reached the prestigious academy. He warmly greeted the guard Will, his longtime close friend. Introducing him to his young son as his former respected colleague, Barney, always polite, gently responded to the greeting and introduced himself and Alberos. Will was very surprised when he met such a divine being, frankly admitting that he had never seen anything like it in his life. Then politely asked why Scott had come, if his name was really on the visitor list. Preparing the official letter, Scott reported that it was a direct request from the director herself. The reader, reviewing the letter, was truly amazed that a former adventurer of such a level had become such a skilled blacksmith, and it was then that Barney intervened and inquired what his father was really like as an adventurer. The question really caught Scott off guard and left him speechless for a moment, but it should be said that he was a promising traveler, not at all as he seemed, and everyone in the capital knew his name and outstanding achievements. He also said that he left the adventurous life because he sincerely felt that he had reached the limits of his abilities and could no longer develop further, and Scott gave up adventures to support the family, working 2 jobs. Barney became even more inquisitive. He impatiently asked what exactly his father had done for them, but Scott was too embarrassed by old memories to answer. But the supportive hand on Scott's shoulder will be accompanied by encouraging words that will boost his longtime friend's confidence. Scott then suggested Barney meet with Lucille while he personally delivered the sticks to the director. As they were leaving, he did not notice the presence of a mysterious man hiding right behind his back. Soon, passing through the fields of the Royal Academy, Barney was very surprised to see how truly spacious it was. Albero's question was whether he had already spoken with Lucille about the specific place of their meeting. Barney said that she invited him to have lunch together in the garden. He decided to rely on the detailed map that Lucille carefully included with the letter. However, he soon noticed the watchful glances of the students and quickly realized that they were very disturbed by the unexpected appearance of a divine being on the academy grounds. People in the capital knew the Alberos well, and for others, this majestic creature could look like a terrifying monster, so it is no wonder that everyone looked at it that way. But Barney was offended that people looked so judgmentally at his beloved Alberos. However, to lift his spirits, Albero gently licked his cheek and soothingly told him not to worry about such trifles. In the garden opposite them, Gina sat with a gloomy face and thought that those previous girls might really have wanted to befriend her, but she could not understand why she ran away so foolishly, like a coward. She thought that perhaps they saw her talking to the monster, but despite that, they still approached her to talk. It was then that Barney approached and sat next to Gina, while Alberos lightly patted nearby, which truly surprised her. She did not know that there were other people with similar abilities. She immediately turned to Barney and asked if he also had the unique gift of talking to creatures. He simply replied that he used a magical tool to interpret their words. He then asked if she could communicate with monsters, and she confirmed, though hesitating a little, that it was quite a strange power. She admitted that she had always been called a strange child for talking to animals. However, Barney just said that he considered it a truly wonderful gift for her. She clearly sighed with relief after his sincere, comforting words. Then she said that she was from a remote village where there were no children her age, so she usually kept herself company by talking to various animals. Gina admitted that she really wanted to make friends at the academy, but said that when someone recently tried to talk to her, she became too scared to respond and instinctively ran away. Barney calmly noted that she spoke to him without visible fear of the Alberos, and Furtish sincerely said that he considered her a truly good person. Seeing his comforting words, Gina was stunned and even said that he reminded her of someone, but before she could add anything else, Lucille arrived and gently greeted her little brother. The vision of the djinn is a sudden, frightened reaction to a free soul. Barney thought to himself that the one she was talking about might be his sister. Lucille then gently hugged Alberos and jokingly said that they really left during the incident in the Redinio Valley. Then she noticed Gina and asked if Gina knew her brother. But Gina simply replied that it was a coincidence. Seizing the perfect opportunity, Barney invited Gina to join them for lunch. Catching the moment, Alberos lightly nudged her to join their small group. Soon as Barney rummaged through his seemingly small bag looking for lunch, Lucille said that it seemed he had brought nothing, but their skepticism quickly turned to surprise when he miraculously pulled out a large basket. Pulling treats and delicious food from the small bag and realizing it was another of his inventions, Lucille praised her faithful engineer of magical devices. Lucille was very happy to see a real homemade meal after a long absence, and Barney gently told her that Dorota had asked her to eat heartily and take good care of herself. While they talked a little, Lucille learned that Professor Evans personally asked Gina to pay special attention to the captive monsters held at the academy. Gina claimed that the professor considered her unique ability to speak very useful for dealing with them. Barney was very surprised that the prestigious Royal Academy actually kept such monsters in cages, and in fact, Alberos wondered if they were sure these creatures wouldn't suddenly start rampaging. Gina assured them that the monsters were securely bound by special magic, and that they were mostly given sedatives and medicines for disease prevention. Lucille said that they not only raised those monsters, but the academy also actively conducted various important research, and in the same garden, they grew pain-relieving herbs specifically for pharmacological studies. Meanwhile, Regil was quite satisfied with receiving such excellent conditions for his stay at the academy. She also admitted that in the future, she would depend heavily on Scott's inventions. Moreover, she proudly said that Lucille's academic achievements were truly impressive and deserved recognition. She informed him that Lucille was an excellent student, always studied well, and recently broke the record for consecutive wins in training battles, for which she was generously rewarded. Regil emphasized that this was a direct result of her relentless work, not just because she relied on her talent as a great sorceress. Scott Bean felt proud learning about his daughter's impressive achievements. Regale assured him that Lucille was in the reliable and skilled hands of the academy, and as Scott was leaving the room, the same suspicious man suddenly appeared right in front of him. With a sly smile on his lips, he began creating a magic circle to lock the director's office and asked if he had made Scott wait long. But Scott remained completely calm and strictly demanded that the figure reveal their true identity. However, the man refused to tell, explaining that he did not want to disturb the director with his presence. He simply named Scott and Barney, which made Scott ask how he knew their names. When the magic circle intensified, the figure said that Scott's son had recently ruined her plan, and at that moment, a large, ominous crystalline form flared up, releasing wild energy into the previously enchanted creatures. At that moment, the monsters in the academy broke free from their chains, began destroying rooms, and attacking all the students around, which attracted the attention of Barney and others. But at first, they could not understand why those students were running so desperately. Lucille quickly realized that they were fleeing from the monster breeding laboratory. Meanwhile, Gina could not believe her eyes that those monsters were now causing chaos. The creatures she had tenderly cared for days continued to destroy the area with terrible force. Gina shouted, doubting their strange behavior, and noticed that poisonous magic was emanating from them. Lassell knew she had no time to hesitate. She immediately took out her staff and boldly aimed it at the fierce beasts, preparing to attack. But Gina intervened and declared that she would stop them. However, when she began to cast a spell, it seems it had little effect on the enraged monsters. When the huge beast lunged at Jin, Lucille intervened swiftly and saved him from the powerful attack. She immediately cast a freezing spell on the monster, but before she could continue, Janet desperately grabbed her by the sleeves. She started crying, saying that those monsters were actually not bad, apologized for not taking good care of them, and begged Lucille not to kill them. Lucille hesitated for a moment, and her resolve wavered, while meanwhile the terrible creature was sneaking up on another frightened student and was about to attack. But Alberos bravely ran up and bit into its huge horns, throwing it across the field, and shouted for the student to run to a safe place. Meanwhile, Barney was leading the other students to the exit and thinking about how to calm the enraged creatures without killing them. When the monster attacked Lucille and Jin, Lucille immediately created a powerful protective barrier to shield them from the threat. However, constantly moving while maintaining such protection was quite difficult for her, and she wanted to use her healing abilities. Barney thought that if he could paralyze them even for a moment, Lucille could then apply her healing magic. It was then that he came up with a brilliant idea, and informed her that he would create a device to stop the monsters, and asked her to hold them off a little longer. Moreover, he noted that even in the Redinio Valley, he experienced the true power of teamwork. Then they suggested to combine their forces to overcome the immediate threat. Barney immediately ordered Alberos to take him to where Lucille said the pain-relieving herbs were located. Seeing wounded students along the way, he realized that it was necessary to act quickly. Soon he reached her garden and found the pain-relieving plant right in front of them. Additionally, he needed a protective magical stone to make the tool. Then Alberos said he would go rescue the other students and asked if Barney could manage on his own from there, and Barney assured him that he would handle it quickly and join them. Meanwhile, Albero arrived on time at the place of chaos and quickly saved the frightened students from the relentless attacks of the fierce monster. Without hesitation, the divine beast boldly charged at those mad creatures and bit into their thick skin with razor-sharp fangs. Another huge monster rushed and struck Alberos with its powerful horns. His side was torn open and he began to bleed. Stunned by the sudden wound, the students consulted whether to flee, but soon they exchanged determined looks and bravely helped Alberos, guarding him with their own strength. All the students regained confidence again, and together helped Alberos, repelling attacks of fierce monsters and defending their prestigious academy. Meanwhile, Albero was sincerely impressed by their unexpected determination. Meanwhile, Scott confronted that suspicious man and heard a growing noise outside. He angrily demanded to know what the madman had done, and the figure calmly replied that it was only an experiment and that he would not allow Scott or the director to interfere with his grand plan, wasting not a second. He created a magic circle and cast dark binding magic on Scott, completely paralyzing him. He also said that Scott seemed to be a close combat fighter, and unfortunately, that did not combine well with his magic. Moreover, he slyly smiled and said that even a once famous adventurer surrendered so easily to his magic that it saved him a lot of time and effort. But his smug smile quickly disappeared when he realized that Scott easily broke free from his magic. At that moment, Scott skillfully came out from behind and pressed a dagger to the man's neck, saying that although it was only a short dagger for self-defense, he could easily cut off his head. He demanded to know his true purpose and what suffering he had caused to those innocent students, while the man remained silent and could not understand how Scott had dodged his magic by sheer force. But with one sweep of his hand, he immediately broke free from Scott's grip and cast an offensive spell in his direction. Scott was still shocked that the man remained unharmed, even after casting a combat spell on himself. However, the man attacked him again and arrogantly said that he just needed to outpace Scott if he was relying only on speed. But when Scott tried to launch his own attack, the man remained unharmed and mockingly said that all his attempts were futile. With another spell, the man unleashed a powerful explosive attack on Scott, causing him to crash into the nearby wall. Mockingly, he said that a former adventurer like Scott could never defeat him and hinted that he would simply give up and fall silent. At that moment, a vivid image of his beloved family appeared in his mind, and with a decisive movement of his hand, he firmly said that he truly was a retired adventurer. But he was also a blacksmith and would do anything to protect his beloved family. At the same moment, a flurry of knives appeared above the man's head, suddenly attacked and struck immediately, but the man barely avoided this precise blow. Scott quickly got back on his feet and unexpectedly found himself right behind the man, seeing a noticeable symbol on the back of his cloak. At the same time, the students try not to fall behind those formidable monsters. Just then, Barney appeared, holding a recently made anesthetizing crossbow, and unleashed a hail of arrows at the enraged beasts, quickly calming them and putting them to sleep in a matter of minutes. Barney created that amazing instrument using only anesthetic curves, magic stones, bench wood, and iron. He immediately turned to Lucille, who seemed to have reached her limit, and quickly ordered them to go down. Then he carefully aimed at an especially large monster and released an arrow with calculated precision. Unfortunately, the anesthetic hardly affected that monster, and it quickly regained consciousness. He could not understand what was happening at all. But surprisingly, Professor Evans arrived to find out why these monsters were going crazy because of the magical poison. Gina immediately said that she gave them the medicine he asked for, and he shuddered upon hearing her words. He complained that the magical poisonous medicine he gave was supposed to calm and prevent diseases, as that mysterious man said. The man Evans mentioned immediately aroused suspicion in Barney, and Gina could not believe that the creatures behaved that way because of the same medicine she gave them. Her eyes fill with tears because she blames herself for the mass riots at the academy, and it is clear that she cannot endure it. Lucille suggested she look around, emphasizing that everyone did everything they could to somehow contain the chaos, and then asked if she was going to give up so easily. She resolutely ordered Gina to pull herself together and help her save the students fighting for their lives. She turned to Barney and ordered him to attack again, to take advantage of the opportunity and managed to cast an important healing spell, and Gina also pulled herself together and decided that she needed to save all the students connected to her and help Lucille amid the chaos. Just then she resolutely took the staff together with Lucille and began to cast the spell. Yan decided to make one last desperate attempt to talk to the tormented monsters. Lucille ordered Barney to administer anesthesia to them again as soon as she gave a clear signal. Gina tried to penetrate the chaotic mind of the monster to calm its rage. She promised that she would no longer let it suffer. But her sincere attempts were unsuccessful because it seemed the magical poison blocked her voice and it did not reach his consciousness. Meanwhile, although Lucille calmed down a bit thanks to her brother's timely intervention, it was still too dangerous to lower her guard, even for a moment. But for her healing magic to work best, she had to get much closer to that enraged beast. Lucille had never before tried to simultaneously maintain a force shield and cast a double healing spell. She was not entirely sure she could do it on the first try, and even if she succeeded, the healing power would likely be much weaker than usual. At that critical moment, it was the only way she could think of. At that decisive moment, Gina decided to fully trust her, just as Lucille trusted Gina. To finally stop this chaos, she immediately strengthened the defense and increased vigilance. After an additional push, Barney did not hesitate and skillfully released a series of anesthetic arrows in its direction, while Lucille focused on activating her healing power, which instantly enhanced the soothing effect of those anesthetic arrows. At the same time, Gina activated her unique abilities and tried once again to establish contact with the distressed creature, apologizing for causing it such incredible pain and saying that she never intended to cause it so much trouble. She added that at that time in her isolated life she had no friends, but it was precisely because of this that school life was not so hard. When the beast gradually came to its senses, Gina once again promised them all to help as soon as this chaos ended, emphasizing that they were all very dear to her. Lucille also said that she was by her side then, which brought a grateful smile to Gina's face. Combining their magical powers, they promised to save everyone, and the behavior of the beasts, once fierce, immediately softened. The powerful body finally relaxes and falls unconscious to the ground. Without hesitation, Gina immediately rushed to him and hugged him tightly. Alberos joined Lucille and they exchanged a victorious palm strike. Meanwhile, Scott was still fiercely fighting the mysterious man, who made another unexpected attack, and Scott successfully avoided the strike and relentlessly continued to attack with his swift dagger, but the man remained strangely unharmed and immediately removed his hood, saying that Scott was quite resilient, but no less annoying. With a heavy sigh, he admitted that he did not intend to fight him at full strength, but circumstances led them to this, and he snapped his fingers, creating a dark, ominous magical circle. From it burst a large stream of sinister energy and formed a tall, monstrous shadow looming behind the man. Scott just laughed and said that anything weaker than this challenge was not worth his time. Unexpectedly, the wall right behind the mysterious man cracked loudly. From the cracked opening, a powerful hand stretched out, quickly placing a reinforced power chain that instantly shackled both the man and the tall shadow behind him, and he frowned. The man noticed that this was exactly why he wanted to imprison the respected director of the academy. Regil said in an authoritative tone that this man really knows how to bring other institutions to chaos. However, to everyone's surprise, the man's figure began to dissolve and disappear into oblivion, and he smiled sinisterly, saying that he had gathered enough results. Before Scott could do anything, the man completely vanished, mockingly saying goodbye. The scene smoothly shifted to the campus grounds, where the chaos was finally calmed. Professor Evans, with shoulders slumped in guilt, apologized to them, believing it was his fault, and Gina suggested that the cause might have been the administered drugs. A few doses probably drove the creatures to frenzied behavior. Evans confirmed that this was the most likely reason, although it was still unclear if something else contributed to their rebellion. Lucille sharply asked how he got those drugs, and he explained that earlier a man in a hood approached them to test a tranquilizer made from magical poison on the monsters they bred at the academy. Since he was personally responsible for the monsters, he could not simply allow the introduction of unfamiliar substances without proper verification. But the man gave him an official state document that supposedly confirmed the calming effect of the drugs and their ability to prevent diseases. When he reached out his hand for the paper to show the king's signature, it exploded violently and caught fire, leaving everyone stunned. Lucille immediately said that it seemed the man used some kind of magic to skillfully hide all traces. When Barney further inquired about this man, Evans replied that he never revealed his identity or affiliation, and that a government approval document is not something an ordinary person can obtain, which further emphasized that he might be a high-ranking official or someone connected to such influential institutions. But now, when that key evidence had burned to ashes, there was no concrete proof left. It was then that Scott arrived together with Regale. He suddenly brought with him a piece of cloth that the man had thrown away. Seeing him injured, Lucille hurried to her father with deep concern and asked about his condition. He replied that the mysterious man attacked the director's office and that it was probably the same person who sold those medicines to Evans. Moreover, he said he noticed a certain mark on the man's abandoned clothing, and when Barney asked about it, Scott reported that it was the emblem of the Royal Magical Defense Corps. In any case, Regale said that the Academy suffered serious, undeniable damage, even if Evans truly did not intend any harm. In a firm voice, she said that she categorically could not approve of his unilateral actions, and informed that this serious matter would be discussed with others to determine the best course of action regarding his involvement. Evans bowed deeply before her and said he would take full responsibility for the consequences. When everyone began to disperse, Scott seriously called Barney. He told his son that the culprit clearly knew about them and the alarming incident in Rodna Valley, then asked if Barney had encountered anyone suspicious during the recent trip, and Barney replied that he had seen no one like that. Ask Scott to say that for now they should just keep moving forward. As he walked away, Barney pondered the terrible possibility that the monster in Rodneo Valley was not a natural phenomenon, but rather a creature deliberately summoned and released by the same man, and he could not understand why this sinister figure was harming his friends and family. But he was certain that this dangerous enemy would attack again. With unwavering determination, he decided in the meantime to become even stronger, so that he could become a protector and guard his loved ones from any approaching danger. Soon in Regile's office, everyone who had been present at the recent incident shared their important conclusions with the director. Summarizing their conversation, she realized that the man who attacked them and the one who offered the drug were most likely the same person. Having seen his power with her own eyes, she thought he might belong to the elite magical core of the kingdom, and there was a high probability that there was a powerful force there that could rival theirs. Scott, looking anxious, said that this could indeed turn out to be a much more serious problem than they initially thought. For now, Regile decided to end the meeting, but firmly assured them that the Academy would secretly continue a thorough investigation as everyone began to disperse. She gently addressed Barney and asked to talk briefly in private. Scott said that in the meantime he would patiently wait outside while they both sat comfortably on the sofa. She apologized for having abruptly stopped him earlier, and immediately remembered his weapon, which wonderfully calmed angry monsters at the Academy. Barney modestly admitted that it was not only about his powers, but also that he borrowed some necessary materials from the Academy to create that magical device. Regile politely asked if he would agree to show her that unique magical item. When he took the weapon out of his small pouch, she carefully examined it. She praised his courage and said that he truly inherited an incredible talent. It seemed that the specialized position of magical device engineer in that country was very rare, and that particular weapon could usually only be created by a very experienced mage. Only a few people had ever reached such a level of mastery, and there was very little information about them. Barney had not fully realized this before, but hearing it from the director herself, he finally understood that he was doing something truly outstanding, and that the power of his chosen craft was incredible. Regile also told him that, although the Academy usually prefers magical and combat professions, there is currently no student with a craft specialty. For the future development of the Academy, she stated that she sincerely wants to learn more about the profession of a magical device engineer. Since Barney was currently the only magical instrument engineer she knew, she sincerely asked him to consider the Royal Academy for his further studies. Barney's eyes widened in surprise upon hearing her unexpected request, and he objected that he was only 6 years old and not very knowledgeable about magic, and seeing his resistance, Regile took on an icy expression and spoke in a cold tone. He directly said that he could use the Academy's expensive anesthetic herb in various individual shops without permission, but her sudden change in behavior immediately altered his reaction, and he no longer said he would think about her proposal. When Barney left the building, he was surprised by Regile's sudden change in behavior. But only he truly knew that his power alone would not solve all problems. Moreover, he was stunned to see the great mess in the yard. And Scott, who was on site, thought that together they could fix many things thanks to his blacksmith skills and Barney's excellent repair abilities. Scott and Barney resolutely set about fixing the damage together. The entire student body united to support their efforts, and fortunately, Will was okay, as he only had a bone fracture, which Lucille immediately tried to heal with her magic. Meanwhile, Barney noticed a student who was gesturing for him to come over and urgently asked for help to repair a severely damaged part of the building. Barney immediately got to work and, skillfully demonstrating his mastery, restored the area with his magic in a matter of seconds. Just then, another group of students with grateful faces approached and bowed low before Alberos, thanking him for bravely saving their lives. Alberos calmly dismissed their gratitude, quietly and with dignity, saying that there is nothing more important than helping each other in times of need. However, one of the students said that, when they saw how the divine beast was helping them so diligently, they understood that it is not worth determining who is friend or foe by appearance, but by their feelings and actions. They resolutely promised that they would definitely become better and much stronger, just like Alberos, who could save others without any hesitation, and meanwhile Barney sincerely felt proud that Alberos finally received due recognition. On the other side of the academy grounds, Lucille gracefully sneaks up behind Gina, who was diligently sweeping the yard. Gina asked if Lucille had finished with the guard, and Lucille immediately agreed, offering to help with the cleaning. Lucille then asked what would happen to the monsters that Gina cared for so tenderly, and Gina replied that Regale allowed her to continue taking care of them, but advised that they would have to temporarily strengthen the restrictions until the chaotic situation fully stabilizes. Lucille said that it would take some time before everything returned to normal, and sincerely added that she wants to take care of those creatures together with Gina and become true friends with them. At that moment, her friends arrived and immediately hugged her tightly, saying that they were sincerely glad that she was safe and unharmed. They admitted that they were very scared seeing from afar how bravely she fought those monsters, but also praised her great courage and amazing magical abilities. Lucille modestly replied that their success was the result of the joint efforts of everyone. Surprisingly, then they turned their attention to Gina and also praised her unique abilities. They introduced themselves as Karen and Melissa and warmly asked if she also wanted to become their friend. Gina immediately agreed, beaming with joy, and shook their hands, while Lucille stood nearby with a warm, satisfied smile. Later that evening, near the main exit of the academy, everyone stood and sincerely said goodbye to Scott and Barney. On the way in the carriage, Scott asked if the director was thinking of accepting Barney into the respected academy, and Barney answered affirmatively. But he also said that although Regale praised his skills so much, a recent event showed that he still urgently needed to improve his skills. Although the power of the magical tools was sufficient, it did not fully affect the most powerful monster, and Barney thought it was due to his lack of skills. However, Scott believed that he himself urgently needed to become stronger. He firmly decided that he could not allow the enemy another chance to escape. It was painfully clear that his movements were now noticeably less agile than in his better years. He decided to personally settle accounts with that cunning man when they met again. Then he thoughtfully told Barney about a remote village named Stone, which lay deep in the verdant Dagon region, and said that when he was just starting his adventurous career, one person there kindly sheltered him. Nearby was a mine where many magical stones could be found. He said that he would soon go there to study by himself and asked if Barney wanted to go with him. Barney was very happy with such an offer. He energetically inquired whether it would really be okay if he joined. Meanwhile, Scott thought long about his initial intention: to protect his beloved family from any danger under any circumstances. Later, within the walls of the Regale Academy, he urgently informed a trusted member of the royal family, the Honorable Lord Massius, about the recent alarming incident. She reported that due to suspicions of forging important documents and interference by the kingdom's magical corps, she came to him personally to deliver this critical report. She then directly asked if he knew at all about these cases, but he categorically said that he had not known about them before and quickly switched to questions about Barney. Just then Zorian arrived and calmly said that he seemed to have overheard some truly alarming rumors. After the arrival of the Zorians, Mage immediately got to the point and inquired whether he knew about the critical situation that had just unfolded at the Royal Academy of Magic. In response, Zorian denied this claim. He admitted that he could not remain silent about the involvement of the Royal Magical Corps and the forged documents, because he was responsible for such sensitive matters and announced that they would immediately begin a thorough investigation at the academy. Acting under the direct orders of the next king, Prince Baker, he smiled slyly and asked if Matthias fully agreed with this investigation. Matthias quickly suppressed a slight unease and gave him the necessary permission. At the same time, he politely asked Zorian to inform his brother that he would be stepping out briefly, because he urgently needed to meet with a very important person. A few days later, Barney and Scott arrived at the same village, and Barney's heart pounded with excitement as he jumped to his feet and said that the huge mine was already visible. Scott told him that although Stone Village is now quite small, it once thrived thanks to a rich magical mine nearby. When everything finally settled down after the troubling incident at school, Scott brought Barney to that very village to find more magical ore, and Barney was delighted at the opportunity to explore the surroundings. He recalled how he had asked Dorothy for permission for this trip back then. She confidently said that the main reason for Scott's visit to that village was to meet a certain person. Barney suspected that Scott had another purpose, sensing something elusive in the air. Alberos, who was walking beside them, told Scott that the surrounding forest seemed connected to the forests they had seen earlier, and also asked if that was really normal. Scott assured that the forest around the village was indeed blocked off, but cautiously added that it would be safe if everyone kept their distance and advised not to lose vigilance. Soon they arrived at the outskirts of Kamien village. Barney was excited and sincerely glad at the opportunity to explore the quiet village, and Scott wisely suggested first going to greet the village head. As they all went deeper into the village, Barney couldn't shake the feeling that there was almost no one here. And Albero also added that it was not lively at all here. Just then, they came across a small group of men gathered in the center. And Barney immediately rushed forward without thinking, but their tense and wary reaction embarrassed him. When they bombarded him with unusual questions, asking who he was and what he wanted from them. However, Scott appeared casually and calmly explained. Their goal was simply to visit the sales department head and ask if they knew where he was. Zelves, who was standing nearby, immediately recognized Scott, and his gaze softened as he inquired if this was really the Scott he once knew. When Scott warmly greeted him, Zil immediately approached, explained that Scott seemed to have grown much stronger since he last saw him, sincerely apologized for the crowd's initial rude behavior, and immediately invited them to his home. Later, when they comfortably settled in Zella's house, he asked how Scott was feeling overall. In response, Scott told him that he had given up traveling and now proudly runs a blacksmith workshop in the capital. When Zell shifted his gaze to Barney and Alberos, he asked what their relationship with him was. Scott introduced them as his beloved son and his magnificent divine beast, which greatly surprised Zell because he could not believe that Scott, whom he knew, had become a father. Even more surprised was Zell when Scott revealed that Barney was actually his second son and also mentioned his elder son and daughter. Then he officially introduced Barney to Zell as the village head and his respected mentor. It was further said that Zell was an excellent warrior and also skilled in offensive magic. Barney was truly delighted when he finally met his father's legendary teacher. Moreover, Zell warmly thanked them for coming to his humble village and admitted that he would have welcomed them better if not for the sad disorder in the village. Hearing this, Scott inquired about the state of the village. It seemed different and undoubtedly gloomier than before. Zales told him that 5 years ago there was a major collapse in the neighboring Dagon mine. Fortunately, there were no fatalities, but many people were seriously injured. The mine was quickly closed, and due to the sudden halt of important trade, a significant portion of the residents left the village. Having felt this, Marnie turned to Alberos and said that it was then they first met in that forest. The mine was indeed connected to that forest, and Barney grew gloomy, thinking that it might not be just a coincidence that both incidents happened almost simultaneously. Zil also said that, due to the circumstances, the rest of the villagers were tense, so he sincerely asked Scott to forgive their previous rudeness. A woman on crutches due to a leg injury approached and warmly offered them tea. When she returned, Scott asked if she had also been hurt during the mine collapse, but Zell objected, saying he had found her unconscious near the forest only recently, so he took her in because she had nowhere to go. He regretted that if they had restored the village buildings and equipped themselves well, they could have invited a needed doctor to the village. Both Barney and Scott exchanged understanding glances before Barney. With enthusiasm, he jumped up and eagerly offered to fix the entire village himself. Without saying a word, he immediately ran out of the house, filled with determination to repair all the damage. He repaired broken things in the village one by one and even happily fixed playground equipment when children innocently asked. Having seen the impressive demonstration of Barney's skills, Zeld was pleasantly surprised that he could fix things so easily and effectively, and for the village this was a relief because there was a severe shortage of skilled craftsmen here. Moreover, he turned to Scott and said that he really noticed talents, but then immediately got to the point. He stated that he knew well that Scott did not come just to exchange simple greetings. Scott no longer hid his intentions and asked if Sills could train him again, addressing him as his master. When Zyle asked about the reason for his sudden decision to resume training, Scott admitted that he never regretted giving up the adventurous life, and there were indeed things that only a skilled blacksmith like him could do. However, with his current strength, he simply could not fully protect his beloved family. Now he truly understood that he urgently needed to become stronger than he was during his adventures. Fortunately, his children grew up strong and resilient, and boldly pursue their dreams. As their father, he had to protect them from all looming threats. Then he respectfully bowed deeply before Zils and asked to be taught once again. Zil firmly placed his hand on Scott's shoulder and said in a soft, almost proud tone that Scott had truly become a wonderful father while he wasn't looking. Moreover, he said that now he had to repay the great kindness he had received from his wonderful son. When Zil pointed at him with a stick, he said he would train him only under one condition, and added that Scott already knew his training was tough, relentless, and required full dedication. Zels laughed sincerely and said that if Scott really wanted, he would undoubtedly quickly get him into the best shape. Meanwhile, with a thoughtful smile, he approached the injured woman who asked about his sudden appearance. He carefully pointed to her visible wounds. She said she was injured due to a mine collapse. Fortunately, she was already recovering because all the villagers were very kind to her. Suddenly, Barney rummaged in a small bag and took out the remaining magical ore left after making the staff. He then sincerely said that he intended to create a special tool that would directly help her recover. He immediately asked her to sit in the neighboring chair. He focused and precisely prepared all the necessary materials. He activated his magical abilities and carefully created a tool that best suited her needs. Combining those materials, he made a device similar to traditional plaster, claiming that if she wore it, her healing power would double. Although it was not as powerful as direct healing magic, Barney said it would definitely speed up her recovery significantly. The lady thanked him for the invaluable help, and Barney insisted that she allow him to carefully apply the device to her leg, gently unwrapping those old bandages. A mysterious tattoo was clearly visible on her leg, but he paid little attention to it, being fully focused on working with the tool, and she sincerely thanked him again, admitting that she had no money to repay him. Barney gently reassured her and said that he was simply sincerely glad that his skills could help someone in trouble. Just then she began to ask why he had come to the village, but before he could answer, Scott knocked on the door and asked them to come out. Barney politely bowed to her and left, completely unaware that there was something strangely eerie and disturbing about her. Instead, Barney went outside and immediately asked if any help was needed. Scott informed him that there was a food warehouse on the outskirts of the village and asked Barney to help carry some food. Barney immediately agreed, and Zell apologized for the inconvenience. Although the buildings in the village were unfortunately being destroyed, they recently managed to significantly improve the food supplies. He also informed them that the ruler of the Dragon Land had recently changed, and that they urgently needed to take care of the food supplies for the village. Scott doubted whether the new lord was an outstanding person. This is confirmed by Zell and shows that he was a reliable person who cared primarily about the welfare of his people. He informed Scott that this person was currently on an inspection and advised them to be sure to greet him when he returned. And at that very moment, everyone heard a loud noise rolling through the quiet village. When they ran to the source, they came across a severely wounded soldier covered in blood, who fell right before them to the ground. Everyone immediately rushed to the wounded soldier, assuming that other members of his squad could not be far given the severity of his wounds and the distance he had traveled. Thinking again, Zell decided to move forward to save others and quickly asked the women nearby to take care of the unconscious soldier. After investigations, Scott advised splitting up and assigning Alberos to track the scent of blood, but Zell's refused. Since he already roughly knew where to look, Zell firmly took command, and they immediately rushed to the probable scene. He said that it must be the retinue of Lord Ryasu, and this clearly indicated that something serious had happened during their inspection. Soon they saw an overturned carriage, broken right in front of them, Now Zels was completely sure that it really was the Lord's carriage, and that they had indeed been attacked. Thanks to his sharp senses, Alberos instinctively warned everyone to be alert. As soon as they arrived at the chaotic scene, the air increasingly smelled of human blood. They came across exhausted soldiers desperately fighting a huge fierce boar, armed only with swords, and the boar was staring intently at them. The beast immediately rushed at them with lightning speed. But reacting quickly, Scott charged at the monster with his faithful dagger, and dealt a strong, precise blow to a vital spot, immobilizing it for several crucial seconds. Everyone was deeply impressed by his extraordinary strength and courage, and Zil, eyes wide with surprise, gave a look that made it clear it was an extremely precise strike to a critical spot. However, to their collective surprise, the boar quickly recovered, showing that it was not an ordinary monster. The creature stood up again and let out a powerful roar that echoed through the dense forest. Suddenly an arrow flew in and pierced his thick skull, and Barney turned out to be a skilled marksman who really wanted his extraordinary crossbow with improved features to actually work this time. To their surprise, the boar stumbled and finally fell to the ground, and Barney once again emerged victorious thanks to his exceptional skills. Suddenly Lord Matthew appeared with his assistant Ramber, and immediately praised Barney's impressive display of strength and accuracy. When he saw him, Zell clearly sighed with relief that Matthews had made it out alive. Meanwhile, Matthews reported that they were attacked on the way back after the inspection. Moreover, he said the escort was minimal, so the situation was critical. He could hardly believe his eyes. Barney really was as powerful as the rumors said, but Barney himself knew nothing about those talks. Matthias explained that he had heard about Barney's glorious victory in the Rodinio Valley and about the recent incident at the Royal Academy. Extending his hand with a warm smile, he said he never thought they would meet so unexpectedly. When Barney shook his hand, he politely asked who he was, and Zell stepped forward and announced that he was the Honorable Lord of Stone Village, Lord Matthias. In addition, Matthews also revealed his unexpected truth. He was the second prince of the Kingdom of Raltuba, a discovery that truly surprised both Scott and Barney. Soon Scott and Barney were led to a large estate where Matthew lived, and as they walked through the corridors, Barney thought to himself. He had never guessed that on the outskirts of a modest village there was such an impressive place, and he thought it was somewhat unreliable for a prince of his status to be in such a secluded location. Matthew sincerely thanked both once again for saving him from a truly dangerous situation. Scott immediately offered help and told the prince to simply ask if he needed assistance with his soldiers. Matthias thanked him again, but added that he had already entrusted this matter to the Zeals. Seeing that he responded so modestly, Barney thought he had always considered the prince much more impressive, but was pleasantly surprised that he behaved so kindly. At that moment, Scott asked him why he had brought them to his estate. To this, Matthias said that he wanted to sincerely ask them for cooperation. He also explained that there were several significant reasons why he was the Lord of Stone Village. It seemed that suspicious people were constantly coming in and out of the forest near the village, which was carefully controlled by the kingdom's magical unit. This observation was also part of his personal investigation. He claimed that it was almost impossible for ordinary civilians to enter the restricted area of the magical units, so this indicated the truthfulness of the information about these intruders. The initial investigation of the forest, where the magical poison mysteriously appeared for the first time, lasted 5 years but yielded no results, and recently there were reports about members of the magical unit involved in a troubling incident at the academy. Matthews said that his life was under direct threat when he tried to investigate the forest alone. At that moment, his assistant intervened and said that an extraordinarily large monster that appeared in the Rodnio Valley usually does not occur in this area. Due to alarming reports about mutated monsters at the academy, and now also a direct attack on His Highness on the same day, their deep suspicions turned into certainty that most likely a magical device caused those large monsters. Matthias realized that their immediate goal was to protect the sinister secrets hidden in the forest. The monstrous creatures from the Rodnio Valley and the recent incident at the academy were probably just terrible subjects for experiments. Matthews carefully connected the facts. Now fully realizing that all these events were connected, Barney, stunned, wondered how the magical unit could commit such terrible acts that even threatened the prince's life. Moreover, Matthias told them that although the ultimate goal is unknown, the one who planned everything is undoubtedly at the very heart of the kingdom and can easily control the powerful magical unit. It was evident that there were many dissatisfied people in the royal family. And that is why he was determinedly seeking the unique power of Barney's magical tools, which had already successfully resolved both previous cases. Feeling his sincere request, Barney doubted his own suitability to take on matters that decide the fate of the nation. Matthias insisted and emphasized that Barney was truly considered the only master of magical instruments in the entire country. He felt that this was extremely important, and that is why he desperately needed Barney's help. When he approached Barney, he said that he could not allow anything that would shake the very foundations of the kingdom, and would do whatever was necessary to ensure lasting peace for his people. Then he gently and hopefully placed his hand on Barney's shoulder and sincerely asked him to help protect these dear people. Barney deeply pondered that he was born an engineer of magical instruments, and there are things only he could accomplish. He had several reliable comrades, but above all in this world he valued his family. If his strength could help protect his loved ones, he firmly decided to help. Especially because in his past life he could do nothing. He then firmly shook Matthew's hand and agreed to his bold plan. Meanwhile, Scott offered him his help. Matthew knelt before them and sincerely thanked them for their invaluable support. He wanted to clarify their next important steps. He announced that he would like to slightly strengthen their troops and planned to return to the capital to carefully reorganize affairs. Barney quickly told him that there were indeed reliable people in the capital, when he could fully trust in such matters. Instead, the woman, who cunningly pretended to be injured, now purposefully went into the deep forest on her own 2 feet, and with a spell summoned a sinister raven, to which she quickly tied a note to its leg, and released it into the dark sky.